Hi everyone and welcome to another video. I'm lauranemacquart and today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in the second half of May. And that half of May was good in the sense that I read a book that I really liked, and not so good in the fact that I DNF'd 2 to 3 books. So the reason I say 2 to 3 is because there is one that I technically DNF'd in the first half of May, but kind of forgot to tell you about that then. And that book is the third volume of Les Cagots d'Aquitaine by Madeilne Mansiet-Berthaud. I talked about reading the first 2 volumes in a previous video that I'll link somewhere, and I thought it was okay, but not enough, not really enthralling. And in that video, by the way, I kept saying cagots d'Aquitaine. It's pronounced cagots d'Aquitaine. Like I said, I've been losing my French quite a lot. Anyway, I picked it up to read the third volume because I did want to finish it. And in the first volume, we follow a man that was kind of interesting. And at the end, he leaves the village that he grew up in. And in the second volume, he meets a young woman who's also kind of fleeing her life. And I hated her. And the third book is about her. We don't have that man. And I was just not interested in her at all. And it's quite interesting when I started to think about it, because one of the things that I hated about this character, this woman, is that she complains a lot. She's not a very nice person. And she has bad things happening to her in the second book. She has an awful upbringing. Her father and her brother do awful things to her. She does not have an easy life, but somehow that did not make me understand. Well, understand, yes, but it did not make me like her. Usually when you hear the backstory of a character, you're like, oh, okay. But she's just like, no, but you're still a horrible person, and not horrible as in bad, but just as in, I just don't like you, you're unkind. So yeah, I was not interested at all, and I am going to have to find a place to give this book. Another book that I DNF was Gilead by Marylin Robinson, and this was one of the picks for my real life book club. So I did kind of push through a little bit, and I listened to it on audio. So it's supposed to be a story about a couple of generations in the US around the time of the Civil War, and there was just something I wasn't sucked in at all. There was something about the voice of the storyteller that, like you might know, I like books that have some kind of direction, and that was not the case at all with this one. Even after listening to it for 3 hours, I still had no idea where it was going. And I know there's supposed to be the Civil War thing at one point, but it wasn't even going in that direction. And it just wasn't interesting enough for me to keep enthralled. And it was also quite dense, and I think I knew it was going to be dense. But yeah, no, it just really wasn't for me. And the last book that I DNF'd was Fathoms by Rebecca Giggs. I listened to that one on audio. It's a non-fiction about whales and about our relationship with whales, and I really liked it, but it's very information heavy. So on audio it was very difficult for me to, well, for one, when I had fallen asleep and then start to listen back to, okay, but where did I fall asleep? I had no idea what I had heard, what I hadn't heard, because there was just so much. And I think this is a book that I would really like in physical form, so I am going to look if my library has it, so, though I really doubt it. But on audio, as I said, I just had no idea. And it's not only information heavy, but one thing with whales is that, as a lot of other creatures, they're suffering from the climate crisis and whatever it is we humans are doing now. And I hadn't expected that. I had expected a little bit more about the whales themselves and not necessarily our impact on the whales, and our impact is not a positive one. So I was missing a little bit of happy, oh, this is how cool whales are, and it was more, look, we're messing the system up again. So it's a little bit negative, at least for my headspace. So once again, might pick it up in physical form if I get to it. Then we have 2 books that I read for the Invisible Cities project. One is La femme qui a mangé les lèvres de mon père by Tudor Ganea. This was my pick for Romania. The original title is, I shouldn't point with the other book, that's unhelpful. The original title is Cazemat, and I think that is also the translation in English. This is a kind of retelling of mermaids, I would say, to a certain extent, but you'll have to wait for my video about invisible cities, Peru and Romania. So this is my pick for Peru, by Renato Cisneros. I read this one in Dutch. The title is De Afstand die ons scheidt, and the English title is The Distance Between Us, and this was translated by Josten Baker. And I should also tell you who translated this. By the way, I really like this edition because, yes, I'm switching between books. Well, first of all, look at this cover, and they have this second flap that has exactly the same thing on the flap as in the book itself. The book also has a flap on the front and but on this flap it has information on the translator and on the person that did the cover art, which I thought was pretty cool. Anyway, the translator was Florica Curriola. So, Peru, The Distance Between Us. This is a non-fiction about Renato Cisneros' relationship with his father. His father is a man that had quite a role to play in very dark time in Peru, and he talks about that. But again, you'll see more about that one in my Invisible Cities video. Now, the one book that I did read, and I for one finished, I will now talk about, and I really loved, is Desorientale by Negar Djavadi. I had expected to love this, and I did as well. The English title, by the way, is Desorientale. This one is in French, in the original French. I'm not even sure it's the original. I think so. But Negar Djavadi is an Iranian woman who, when she was 11, had to flee to France. And this book is about an Iranian girl that has to flee to France. So I think it is very largely based on her own story. I haven't really looked into it, to be honest. But in this book she talks about her family's history, so the life of her grandparents, the life of her parents mostly also. Her father is a historicus or a writer? I think a historicus, but a very intelligent man who is against the regime, and he gets into a lot of trouble for that. And not the kind of trouble that you get into when you're 10 and you aren't listening to your parents, but the kind of trouble where you don't know when someone is going to survive. But she's very young at the time, and so you've got that from the point of view of a child, partly, and also her looking back as an adult. And like I said, when she is 10, she flees to France, so you've also got that part of the story where she was already in Iran in a family that was very Francophile, so she had already learned French, but there is still the going to France, like, oh, what's your accent? And things like that. She talks about her relationship with her mother, with her father, with her sisters. She has 2 elder sisters. And there is also, intertwined with that, you've got modern day time, where she is trying to get pregnant in vitro. So while she's at the doctor waiting for her fertilization, and a very exciting prospect, she kind of looks back on her life and on her family, and you kind of get deeper and deeper. In the beginning, I had a little bit of trouble to really place everybody and everything, but the more you stay in the book, the more you get a feeling for the different people in this life. And what I also really liked, and this book, so these 2 books kind of resembled one another in the sense that they are about a child whose parent has a big role to play in the politics of their country, and they're both about countries that I don't know much / anything of. But in this one, it was written in a way, there was a lot of information about Peru and about the politics in Peru, and so much so that I was completely lost in the names of the dates, the time, the places, everything. I had no context at all. And in this one, it was done still in the way that you would have gotten more about it if you had the context yourself, but not in a way that, as a person who did not have context, I was completely lost. So I really appreciated that. But yeah, it's a brilliant book. I also liked it because it's not super touchy-feely, ooh la la. It's kind of straightforward, and she tackles a lot of themes. So yeah, really, really like this, and I might give it to my mother to read. lend it to her at least. The problem with lending books to my mother that I think she'll like is that if she likes them, she keeps them. I kind of want to keep this one. But yeah, really like this one. Those are all of the books that I want to talk about right now. I realize there's only one I really talked about. But yeah, sometimes life is such. I will see you in another video. I'd love to hear from you, as always, if you've read any of these books, the one that I DNF'd or the ones that I didn't DNF. And I'll see you in another video. Bye!
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.